Strange skeletons that stunned archaeologists, the mysterious remains of a horrifying ritual? Welcome back to Ancient History, the channel where we uncover secrets buried beneath the thick dust of time. Today, I'm going to tell you about a discovery that left the entire archaeological community stunned, literally frozen for 5 seconds, and even triggered an emergency meeting because no one could explain what had just been found. In a recent excavation, scientists uncovered a series of human skeletons positioned in eerie, unnatural postures. Some had their limbs twisted as if they were struggling. Others had their mouths wide open, as though frozen mid-scream in a state of panic. One glance is enough to tell that these weren't ordinary deaths. It was as if an entire community had experienced something truly horrifying. Even more disturbing, the skeletons weren't scattered randomly. They appeared to be deliberately arranged in a ritualistic manner, systematically, with order and purpose, possibly linked to some ancient form of sacrifice that has never before been recorded. Archaeologists quickly stepped in, proposing a slew of theories. Are these the remnants of a lost civilization? Evidence of a dark ritual? Or could this be a spiritual mystery that was long buried and forgotten? So where exactly were these skeletons found? What do their postures reveal? And could they be sending us a message from the past? Don't take your eyes off the screen, let's dive into the mystery together right now. A 900-year-old skeleton trapped in tree roots after a violent storm? A medieval murder mystery? What would you do if, on a perfectly normal day, you went out to clean up fallen trees after a storm, only to discover a human skeleton lying beneath the roots? Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But this really happened, and it took place in May 2015 in a small town called Collooney, located in County Sligo in the northwest of Ireland. At the time, a powerful storm had swept through the area, bringing with it strong winds and heavy rain, causing a 215-year-old oak tree to be completely uprooted. But the real surprise wasn't the fallen tree. After the storm, while locals were clearing the debris, they made a chilling discovery: a human skeleton beneath the tree's roots. Just hearing that is enough to give you goosebumps, isn't it? At first, everyone thought it might be a recent crime scene, a body hidden under a tree, so the locals immediately called the police. But no, when authorities arrived and examined the remains, they realized this wasn't anything recent. In fact, it was the beginning of a centuries-old mystery. The skeleton turned out to be very, very old. Ireland's National Monuments Service quickly stepped in and dispatched an archaeological team to the site. Leading the team was archaeologist Linda Lynch. Together with her colleagues from the Sligo Leitrim Archaeological Services, they began a preliminary excavation and analysis. The result? The remains belonged to a young man between the ages of 17 and 20. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Using radiocarbon dating, they discovered that this young man had died sometime between AD 1030 and 1200 during the medieval period, over 900 years before the skeleton was found. And here's where it gets disturbing. His death wasn't natural. The skeleton showed multiple fractures on the ribs and hands, likely caused by a knife or other sharp object, suggesting that the young man may have been tortured before he died. But what kind of torture was it? Who did this to him, and why? These remain unanswered questions. What we do know is this: when the oak tree fell, its roots pulled the upper half of the skeleton out of the ground, while the lower half remained buried, creating a haunting scene, almost as if nature itself had been trying to unearth a long-buried story. According to archaeologist Marion Dowd, the project's director, the young man was likely a native Gaelic individual. That period in Irish history saw frequent conflict, especially after the Anglo-Norman invasion in 1169. It's possible that he was caught up in a power struggle, or simply became the victim of a personal vendetta in the brutal medieval era. But here's the strange part. He was buried according to Christian traditions, which suggests he wasn't just some anonymous victim or criminal dumped in a shallow grave. No personal belongings were found with the body, but records show that there used to be a church and cemetery in that area during the 19th century. To this day, no other evidence of Gaelic presence has been discovered at the site. And so, this mystery leaves behind a massive gap no one has been able to fill. Who was this young man? Why was he tortured? And who buried him in a place where, 900 years later, a tree would accidentally preserve his story like a time capsule? 2,800-year-old skeleton of an Iron Age princess unearthed. The story began in an area called Saint-Vulbas, located just about 20 miles from the city of Lyon, France. While workers were clearing land to build the Plaine de Lane Industrial Park, an excavator hit something unusual buried in the ground. That's when a team of archaeologists from France's National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research, INRAP, was called in. What they uncovered left the entire archaeological community stunned. Buried about 9.5 feet underground, they found the remains of an oak coffin, a type of wood that is incredibly rare and durable over time. The coffin was rectangular, measuring nearly 10 feet long and 3.3 feet wide, carefully buried in a large pit. But that wasn't even the most astonishing part. As they excavated further, they discovered the skeleton of a woman, along with a collection of exquisitely crafted jewelry. These items turned out to be key clues in identifying her as likely being a princess or noblewoman of the Hallstatt culture, which flourished during the 8th century BCE. At this point, you're probably wondering, what exactly did they find inside this ancient tomb? On her wrist, scientists found a green glass bracelet combined with bronze beads, a beautiful piece that also demonstrates the advanced metalworking skills of the time. There was also a bronze alloy clasp about 2 inches wide, suggesting she once wore a leather belt. And as you can imagine, leather goods back then were rare, expensive, and hard to produce. But that's not all. Inside the tomb, they also found fragments of the pelvis, femur, part of the skull, and the sacrum. Despite the passage of time eroding much of the remains, the skeleton was still well preserved enough to offer valuable insights into her lifestyle, beliefs, and social status. Interestingly, this wasn't the only burial site discovered in the area. Archaeologists found 2 other graves, but clearly, it was the Hallstatt princess who captured the world's attention. The Hallstatt culture is renowned for its advanced farming techniques, complex metalwork, and especially for its ancient trade routes connecting southeastern France to the Mediterranean, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and technology. This was also the era when hill forts began to rise, fortified with walls and defensive ditches to protect against hostile tribes. But here's the thing. If it weren't for this accidental discovery, the stories of the Hallstatt princess and the entire Iron Age culture she belonged to might have remained buried forever. So what do you think? Was the woman in that tomb truly a princess? Or could she have held an even higher or more mysterious status? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And remember, the ancient world still holds countless secrets, just waiting for us to uncover them. 3,000-year-old assembled skeletons found in Scotland. Some archaeological discoveries leave us awestruck by their beauty. Others puzzle scientists with their strangeness. And then there are those that chill us to the bone, too mysterious, too bizarre to believe. What I'm about to tell you is one of those stories. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but it's 100% real. It all began in a windswept, remote corner of the world, the island of South Uist, off the coast of Scotland, specifically at a site called Clad Hallen. At first, it seemed like a fairly typical excavation site, but in 2011, while archaeologists were digging, they uncovered 2 ancient skeletons, dating back nearly 3,000 years. At this point, you might be thinking, oh, just another set of bog mummies like those found across Europe. But no, what came next was the real plot twist that made everyone's hair stand on end. After conducting thorough analysis, including CT scans, DNA testing, and radiocarbon dating, scientists discovered something truly unsettling. These weren't the remains of 2 individuals. Each skeleton was actually a composite, assembled from the body parts of at least 3 different people. One person's skull, another's torso, someone else's limbs. Male, female, old, young, all pieced together into single, strange human forms. It's as if our ancestors were building humans like puzzles. Creepy, right? But it gets even deeper. This wasn't done for shock value or out of superstition. Some researchers believe this practice may have been part of a deeply spiritual or symbolic ritual. To the people of that time, the dead may not have been seen as individual souls, but rather as a collective presence, a representation of the family line, or even a symbol of communal identity passed down through generations. Much like how we say today, the dead live on in our hearts. The ancient people might have meant that literally, through reconstructed bodies made from the bones of their loved ones. The dead were still alive in a sense, living on through flesh, memory, and ancestral connection. Professor Mike Parker Pearson, who led the research team, even proposed a striking theory. These bodies may not have been buried right after death. Instead, ancient people may have preserved the corpses for years, even decades, using natural methods such as burying them in peat bogs, exposing them to smoke in huts, or storing them in underground chambers to prevent decomposition. Then, at a spiritually significant time, they would assemble the body parts and conduct a ceremonial burial. This could have been a way of maintaining the dead's presence in daily life, as a spiritual protector or a symbol of ancestral authority for the family or the wider community. What amazed scientists most, though, is this. Without coffins, chemicals, or modern technology, these ancient people still found effective ways to preserve human remains, preventing the typical decay process. This proves they weren't the primitive people we sometimes imagine. They had a remarkable understanding of their environment, of the human body, and of the spiritual significance of death. When you look at these composite skeletons, the eerie part isn't just the physical appearance, it's the story behind them. In every joint, every fused bone might lie an ancient tradition of confronting death, not as an end, but as a transformation into something greater, a resonant being, built from those most loved. So, were these ancient people trying to send us a message? One we still haven't deciphered? It's hard to say, isn't it? But one thing is clear. These skeletons are still there, lying beneath the earth like unfinished puzzles of history, waiting to be slowly pieced together. And who knows? Maybe one day in the near future, we'll look back and realize our ancestors may have understood life and death far more deeply than we ever imagined. Ancient skeleton with knife prosthetic reveals a story of survival in the Middle Ages. Did you know that archaeologists recently uncovered an incredibly unique skeleton at a Lombard cemetery in northern Italy? And the story behind it is nothing short of astonishing. The remains belong to a man who lived over 1,000 years ago, sometime between the 6th and 8th centuries AD during the Middle Ages. But what made this skeleton stand out among hundreds of others is this. The man lived with a knife permanently attached to his right arm, replacing a missing hand. Sounds wild, doesn't it? How could someone back then survive with a prosthetic arm that was literally a knife? First, archaeologists estimated that the man was between 40 and 50 years old when he died. His right hand had been lost due to a severe wound, though it's unclear whether it was caused by an accident or in battle. Given what we know about the Lombards, a fierce warrior people, it's not far-fetched to think he may have lost his hand in combat. But what truly stunned researchers was the evidence found on the remaining forearm bones. The end of the arm didn't just show signs of injury, it showed clear indications that a prosthetic had been attached and used for a long time. How could they tell? Because the bones displayed scar tissue formation and bone spurs, suggesting prolonged pressure and use, exactly what you'd expect if a tool or object had been regularly strapped to that spot. Even more surprisingly, the man's teeth showed unusual wear patterns, suggesting he used his mouth to tighten leather straps that held the knife arm in place. Like something out of an adventure movie, right? But this is a real-life testament to the ingenuity and determination of people living in a time when medicine was nowhere near what it is today. And here's something else that's fascinating. The way this man was buried was entirely different from other individuals in the same cemetery. Normally, Lombard warriors were buried with their weapons laid beside them, with arms resting naturally. But in this case, the man's right arm was bent at the elbow and crossed over his body, with a knife placed where the hand would have been, its handle directly aligned with the cut end of his forearm. In addition, archaeologists found a D-shaped buckle and fragments of organic material, likely leather. This suggests that the knife was part of a custom leather cap or harness, securely fastening it to his arm, both practical and durable. From this discovery, we see more than just a tale of personal survival. It reveals a man's incredible resilience and adaptability, but also the care and support of the community around him. During a time when medical knowledge was limited, for someone to lose a hand and still live into middle age while using a tool prosthetic to carry out daily life is truly remarkable. This shows that the Lombard society didn't abandon the disabled, but rather helped them adapt, supported them, and ensured they remained part of the community. Can you imagine a man from centuries ago missing part of his body, yet still managing to live, work, and even use his mouth to adjust the straps on his knife arm? This story not only amazes us with the ingenuity and endurance of ancient humans, but also reminds us of the compassion and empathy that existed within early societies. So, what do you think about this man? Does the story of his knife arm leave you as astonished and inspired as it did the scientists who found him? Just imagine, a world with no modern medicine, yet people still fought to overcome hardship, to invent, and to hold on to life with everything they had. That's the message this remarkable skeleton has left behind, a timeless lesson in human strength, creativity, and humanity. A skeleton with a giant head in the Peruvian jungle. Have you ever wondered how many mysteries remain buried deep within Earth's ever-changing landscape? Each archaeological discovery doesn't just transform our understanding, it shakes the world with profound questions about humanity's origins. Let me tell you about one of the most controversial finds in recent memory, a giant-headed skeleton unearthed in a forested region of Peru, leading many to believe it could be evidence of extraterrestrial life. Specifically, in November 2011, archaeologists in Peru working near the town of Andahuaylilas discovered two extraordinarily strange skeletons in a forest area. The first skeleton stunned observers with a skull measuring a staggering 20 inches, about half the length of the entire body, which measured roughly 40 inches total. Imagine a head so large it dwarfs the rest of the body. Could this really belong to a living creature that once existed on Earth and not a hoax? But the peculiarities don't end there. This skull had massive, round, deep eye sockets and visible cranial sutures, evidence of injury or perhaps surgery. It even contained two wisdom teeth, a feature adults possess, which makes the combination with an infant skull shape even more uncanny. The second skeleton was equally mysterious, only about 12 inches long, missing a distinct face, curled in a fetal position, and wrapped in a mysterious organic layer. It resembled something alien, like a creature humanity has never encountered. Intriguingly, the shape of the skull bears an uncanny resemblance to depictions of aliens in popular media, especially in films like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008. This resemblance fueled speculation. Are we looking at alien remains or the bones of an undiscovered race of giants? Immediately after the discovery, 3 anthropologists from Spain and Russia examined the remains and performed DNA testing on the eye socket tissue. They concluded that this was not modern human, but rather a distinctly different species with an oversized head, even calling it extraterrestrial in nature. Today, this skeleton is meticulously preserved at a museum in Cusco, Peru, serving as a provocative piece of evidence that challenges our assumptions about Earth's history and raises the possibility, however remote, of extraterrestrial visitors. But do you believe these claims? Has science truly proven alien origins in this skeleton? As Albert Einstein famously said, "What is unknown to us is always greater than what we know." Personally, I lean toward a different hypothesis, that this might be the remains of an ancient giant, a mysterious human race not yet documented by modern science. What do you think? Could this giant-headed Peruvian skeleton be proof of alien life, or simply a hidden population of giants who once walked the Earth? The mystery remains, waiting for us to probe further. Perhaps one day soon, we'll have answers to the biggest questions of all, about life and our origins. Which hypothesis do you lean toward? While this story makes for gripping speculation, it's important to note that mainstream science offers more grounded explanations. Elongated skulls in Peru are most commonly the result of artificial cranial deformation, a known cultural practice, not extraterrestrial traits. The Museum of Osteology displayed a cone-shaped Peruvian skull with a possible metal implant, which may represent ancient cranial surgery, or potentially a modern fake. Experts remain divided due to lack of conclusive scientific testing. The so-called giant skull from Andahuaylilas has been thoroughly examined by forensic anthropologists, who concluded that it likely stems from a congenital condition in an infant rather than an alien being. In short, while the giant-headed skeleton remains a compelling story, the scientific consensus strongly supports it being a human anomaly rooted in cultural or medical conditions, not evidence of extraterrestrials. The 1,300-year-old Dark Age dancer skeleton found in Siberia. Have you ever thought that the way someone is buried could tell a strange, haunting story? If not, let me share with you a recent discovery from the Ust-Ivanovka burial site in Primorsky Province, Siberia. Archaeologists uncovered a 1,300-year-old skeleton laid to rest in a burial pose so unique and compelling, it left experts utterly astonished. This skeleton has since been nicknamed the Dark Age Dancer, and that name alone makes you want to uncover the mystery, doesn't it? The remains belong to a man in his early 30s. His body was buried in a wildly unconventional position, legs crossed as if he were dancing, knees flared outward, with his arms wrapped around his pelvis. Well, who would think that this was a normal burial ritual? Even lead archaeologist Denis Volkov remarked that the posture is completely unlike any traditional burial style known in Siberia. Some researchers suggest the man may have been bound before burial, because otherwise his limbs would have been straight, not twisted into such an unnatural embrace. Remarkably, no other burial from that era has shown signs of the deceased being tied in such a manner. This baffles researchers even more and raises questions. Was this an unusual ritual? Did it carry a deeper symbolic meaning? The uniqueness doesn't stop there. His grave was rectangular, whereas most others found in the area are circular. That's a striking deviation, one that sparks curiosity about why this particular individual received such markedly different treatment. What's more, other skeletons in the cemetery belong to elderly individuals, often aged 50 to 70, whereas this man was only around 30. His young age, combined with the dancer-like burial pose, deepens the mystery surrounding his life and death. Adding another layer to the intrigue, archaeologists found an arrowhead embedded deep in his hip. This suggests he might have died from a violent attack, perhaps in battle or conflict. But that may not be the whole story. Researchers are also exploring whether serious illnesses, such as tuberculosis or syphilis, might have weakened him prior to death. Of course, while these hypotheses seem plausible, they're only the beginning. Experts will need to conduct further analysis, from bone microstructure to any associated fossil evidence, to uncover the truth behind both his cause of death and the bizarre burial pose. But just think about it. Finding a 1,300-year-old skeleton arranged in a dance-like twist is enough to stop you in your tracks. In archaeology, unexpected discoveries open windows to rich stories about human history, cultural practices, and unresolved mysteries. Dear friends, that brings us to the end of today's journey into the mystery of the Dark Age Dancer skeleton. Which discovery impressed you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming fascinating explorations. For now, thank you for watching, and see you next time.